Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park. And today we welcome Kyla Zhao.
Kyla Zhao writes novels starring women of color in the workplace, including Valley Verified and The Fraud Squad. Her books have been featured by media outlets such as NBC, CBS, Good Morning America, Vogue, Cosmopolitan, Buzzfeed, and etc. For her contributions to Asian media representation, Kyla was selected by Forbes for its 30 Under 30 list and Tatler as a Leader of Tomorrow. In addition, she was awarded a certificate of recognition by the California State Assembly. She now works at a tech company in Silicon Valley after graduating from Stanford University in 2021. You can find her newsletter at kylazhao.substack.com. You can find her on Instagram at Kyla I Zhao, TikTok at Kyla Zhang Ground, and Twitter at Kyla Zhao _.
And we welcome Kyla Zhao.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for agreeing to do the interview for us.
Of course.
So, we usually like to start off with trying to get to know a little bit about you. So, we've seen your writing, we were able to read your book, but who are you outside of writing?
So I work at a tech company. That's my day job. I do product go-to marketing, which is a mix of strategy work and marketing and communications. I also like doing Pilates and going on Reddit in my free time. I recently started watching The Bachelorette, so that has been my latest guilty pleasure.
Was
Nice.
The Bachelorette spurred on by the fact that we finally had an Asian American Bachelorette?
Yes, that is the season I'm currently watching.
Was it worth it? Because we watch other reality shows that are brain numbing, I guess. But
Yeah.
did you like the season that you watched?
I only just started watching it yesterday, and this is my second romance-centered reality TV show that I've watched. The first one is Singles Inferno, set in South Korea. And it's quite a different experience watching Singles Inferno, where, the entire cast is Asian. And so the ethnicity isn't really like a focal point. Whereas The Bachelorette, starring Jen, her ethnicity was brought up, many times because she is the first Asian American bachelorette. And so it's interesting seeing how that focus is different between the two shows.
I feel like we could do a whole nother podcast on just this alone.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, moving on to your book, Valley Verified, what was your inspiration behind it, and were there any interesting moments that came up while writing this book?
So the inspiration is drawn partly from my own experience of moving from the world of high fashion to the high tech industry. Before I joined my current tech company, I used to work in fashion. I was a writer at Vogue in Singapore, and fashion is my first love. It's something that I still feel really passionate about. But then this job opportunity came up to work for a tech company in Silicon Valley, and I thought it was an interesting challenge. So I decided to take the plunge and accept the offer. And then I came back to Silicon Valley. And that was a very big transition. It was really complicated to begin with because I was recently out of college. And so, I was new to the workforce. I was new to being a working adult. So there were the usual life transition issues that came with that. And then at the same time, I was doing this really dramatic career pivot. And I honestly wasn't prepared for how much of an outsider I would feel or how insecure I would feel about my own abilities or the lack thereof. And it felt like I was constantly trying to catch up, that I was struggling just to stay afloat. And I was also alone in America. My entire family was still back home in Singapore, and I didn't have anyone to confide in. And so every day just felt like a struggle to try and get through, to try and keep my head above water. And so that kind of gave me the inspiration for Valley Verified about this fashion writer who has to take on a new job at a tech startup in Silicon Valley. And then she's just thrown into this shark pool of tech bros and tech billionaires. And she also has to battle her own insecurities.
That definitely sounds like the scenario that I've heard in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of been driven by that. I don't know. Even in your book, it kind of has this bro type mentality. So I could definitely see how that could have felt overwhelming and just, I don't know, very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah. So writing this book was kind of cathartic for me. I think it helped me kind of come to terms with how I was feeling because frankly, I didn't want to admit to myself that I felt insecure, that I felt very incapable. And so I kept it all bottled up within myself and I didn't want to confide in anyone. But through writing this book and kind of fictionalizing everything, it gave me a safe space to realize, like, oh, this is really how I feel. And it's actually valid to feel this way. And it is quite normal, frankly. And so writing this book was it was kind of like therapy for me in a way.
Mhm.
Absolutely. How long did it take you to write the whole book?
So writing the first draft didn't take that long. It took about 2 months. I remember when I wrote the first sentence. So I had been at my tech job for about 4 months, and then it was the Christmas holiday break, and I was flying back home to Singapore to spend Christmas with my family. And then on the flight back home, it was like a 17-hour plane ride, and there weren't any good movies on that particular flight. And so I started thinking a lot, and then I started thinking about what will I say when my parents ask me how my new job is going. I wouldn't be able to lie to their face because I think they would immediately see that, something wasn't quite right. And so the first sentence came to me, which was, from what I remember, it is Zoe Zhang is having an absolute blast. And I think that remained the first line throughout all the drafts and up till the final published version. Because in the book, my main character, Zoe, she was lying to herself and lying to everyone else about being okay, but she was actually struggling a lot. And that was how I felt. I felt like I was putting on this face of success, of being a successful working professional, but inside it just felt like I was floundering.
For sure. You mentioned that your experience is very similar to Zoe Zhang's. Is there any particular part from the story that's similar to what you've encountered in the tech world?
A lot of the feelings of being an imposter, of being an outsider, of feeling like I didn't deserve to be there, that I was unqualified, and that people would realize that I was unqualified, all those feelings were drawn from a very personal part of my life. And so releasing this novel felt quite vulnerable in some way, that I'm just displaying all these complicated and maybe some uglier emotions just out there for readers to digest. So that part was very close to my personal life.
For sure.
I feel like that's a big characteristic of, I don't know, a lot of Asian people that I talk to, where you do so much work and you try to push yourself to the brink of perfection or success, and yet you still don't feel like you did enough, even though clearly, like, you listen to other people around you and they're like, no, like, you're doing such a great job, which was kind of what Zoe was going through. She was like, I don't belong here. And then people are like, you were able to create this system that then got picked up by, what's his name, that tech billionaire that was investing.
Logan Harrison.
Yeah, and it's just like I feel like that's such a commonality between a lot of Asians who try to make it within different industries like this.
Yeah, like being hesitant to kind of take credit when they should be taking credit, but also being hesitant to ask for help because you feel like maybe you don't deserve to get help and that you have to solve everything by yourself.
Absolutely. One of the relationships that we saw in this more specifically is that relationship between Lillian and Zoe. And it was unique because we see Lillian, who was another Asian American and female within that tech industry, and Zoe, who was kind of the same. So they had this fraught relationship because of Zoe's initial perception of Lillian. Is that something you've noticed personally in the tech world and perhaps other male-dominated spaces? And do you have any thoughts on why this might be so prevalent?
Yeah, I think you're right in that it is kind of in a lot of male-dominated spaces. And I think a lot of it just comes from the societal perception that women have to be pitted against one another as competition. And that's something that I think I and many other girls have been exposed to from a young age. Whenever we watch Hollywood movies, it's always girls competing to be the homecoming queen, girls competing to be the most popular girl, to get a cute boy, and there can only be one winner. And then so everything turns into this sort of zero-sum game where there's a clear winner and then there are the clear losers. And especially in male-dominated industries like fashion, where I used to work, or even in the tech industry, where there are so few standout women in the industry. I think, those few women are rightfully praised and lauded for all the hard work that they have put in to get to where they are today. But just the fact that there is such a small number of them can inadvertently create an impression that there is only room for a few of them to succeed. And then so women see one another as competition. And when we do that, we let the real people in power, the men, especially the white men, get away with creating a system that sets us up as competition towards one another. And even in publishing as well, like there still exists this notion that there is only room for a few stories by authors of color, for a few stories about characters of color every season. And once there's one story by an Asian author, it feels like it's taking away a spot from another Asian author. And we shouldn't see it that way. We should be questioning why we even feel that way in the first place. And so that was something that I was trying to explore with this plot line. Like, why do we see one another as competition when, I do believe now that a rising tide lifts all boats. And when we try to help one another out, we help the entire community. Yeah.
Absolutely. I appreciate you mentioning the dominant culture and how the dominant culture uses media and uses its own societal standards to cause this competition.
Yeah.
And as a male, I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to.
Speaking of males, we thought that Damien, the character in Valley Verified, might have been a neurodivergent character because of how his speech was so straightforward and his demeanor tended to be devoid of emotion. Was this how you also envisioned this character?
I don't think I explicitly set up to make him neurodivergent or not. That wasn't actually a point that really occurred to me. But in a way, he is an amalgamation of different kinds of men that I have come across in the valley, some of whom might be on the spectrum, some of whom are not. So I guess in a way, he reflects a certain kind of person that we would encounter in real life.
And there are some interesting things about the tech industry where having some varieties of neurodivergence can actually help you in the tech industry because of how you can work and what that job requires, because it's such a strenuous job. So there are different things like ADHD and autism that helps you just kind of focus on your work. So there is a certain draw to the tech industry for people of neurodivergence as well. So I can definitely see how within your work you might have seen a lot of characters that are not characters, but like real true human people that would have displayed similar actions like Damien.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges of writing this novel was that, I think a lot of people have an idea of what Silicon Valley is like or what tech bros and tech billionaires are like. And I wanted to write about these characters and these personas without turning them into caricatures because a lot of my good friends are part of the tech ecosystem. I am part of the tech ecosystem, and I don't want to reduce any of us to just a stereotype. So that was one of the challenges while writing this novel that I wanted to add some humor to it. I wanted to be able to turn this into kind of a satire, but without flattening everything out.
For sure. In your experience in Silicon Valley, or in the tech world anyway, is there a false stereotype that many people believe that is not true?
I think many people think that everyone in tech world is just like really awkward and stuff, but frankly, and maybe this is more unique to startups, a lot of people here are extremely charismatic.
Hmm,
You kind of have to be if you want to stand out from the crowd because this is also an extremely competitive and oversaturated ecosystem, and you need quite a high dose of emotional intelligence to get ahead.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we really enjoyed your book. I could definitely tell that a lot of the characters come from personal experience, or either that or you're really good at faking a lot of this stuff or creating these false worlds. But I can definitely tell there's a lot of soul that was put into each characters, and then the twists and turns that we were taking on as we were reading through the book and seeing the perspectives that Zoe was going through in this new space definitely felt like
Yeah,
a journey that you had presented to your readers.
thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely. It was such a well-built world. And it felt while Zoe was being uprooted from her life, I felt the uprootedness of it all and being placed into a new world and growing from that, I felt
Yeah.
was such a refreshing viewpoint in the entire book.
Thank you. I'm really glad that part resonated. And another thing, I think as you're being put into a new world, it's about how do you deal with the world that you're leaving behind and the people you're leaving behind. And that was something that I encountered, and I guess I'm still kind of experiencing my personal life, moving away from my home in Singapore, where all my family and my high school friends are still there. And how do I keep in touch with them? How do I balance that old part of my life with this new part that I'm being exposed to? And how do I make sure that I'm staying true to both parts? I'm still grappling with that, and I think Zoe is as well. She goes through, the experiences of growing apart from old friends and of wanting to stay close, but also maybe realizing that there are parts of the relationship that has to change when she moves across the country and when she leaves the old job.
Absolutely. With this type of writing, I feel like it's sometimes difficult to bounce in and out of those worlds, but it seems like you've had another book. Is there anything you'd like to promote, or where can people find your work outside of the places that we've listed?
I just recently released another book in September, and this one is for a slightly younger audience, so like teenagers and preteens, although adults are definitely very welcome to read it as well. It is called May the Best Player Win. I describe it as a family-friendly version of the Queen's Gambit, and it explores gender stereotypes and performance anxiety and the pressure to succeed through the eyes of a chess prodigy, and it's inspired by my personal experience as a chess player. I've been playing chess since I was 6, and I'll actually be flying to the World Chess Championship next month to present my book. So I'm very excited about that.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
And as for where you guys can find my books, and all the places that you've listed, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Bookshop, your local indie bookstore, and libraries. Yeah, always support libraries.
Absolutely. And we like to end our interviews with the same question for all of our authors. And that question is, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
I love Asian ice cream flavors. I love red bean. I love black sesame. I love ube, matcha, but I think matcha is more common. I think my holy trifecta is black sesame, red bean, and ube.
Mm.
Bonus if they mix red bean and black sesame or red bean and matcha. Yeah.
So are you a bingsu, like pat bingsu person?
Oh yes, yes. Well, I don't like the rice cakes, like the injomi. I think that's not really my taste. But I love like matcha bingsu and then with that hip of like red bean on top.
Mm.
Yeah, sometimes I would go to bingsu shops and just ask for like a little serving of the red bean topping and then I would just like eat it.
That's awesome. I think
Nice.
that's our most unique answer to that question so far.
Exactly.
Because I'd put
Oh, what's
bingsu.
the more common answer to like the ice cream
There's
flavor?
no common answer. I think one person said like chocolate chip or mint chocolate chip or something.
I feel like a lot of the flavors that's been shared with us are more common flavors like mocha or mint chip, I think. And so to hear flavors like matcha and red bean, it's refreshing.
Yeah, I was just in Japan recently and like red bean was everywhere. I could walk into any random 7-Eleven and get it. And here it's like so hard to find it. I have to really go out of my way to try to hunt it down.
Wow. Even in the Bay Area.
Yeah, even in the Bay Area. Like matcha is really common, but red bean, black sesame, like you'll have to go look for it.
Mm.
Well, we really appreciate everything that you've written, the time you agreed to spend with us. Thank you so much for the interview. For people that want to reach out to us more and want to ask us questions, how can people do so?
Y'all can reach us through email at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com, or you can join the conversation on Instagram at Asian Book Club Pod.
We also have our bookshop with books that we've read in the past, books that we recommend, and books that we plan to read in the future.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat.
Bye.
Bye.